This is Heather Lockett with Lasting Conversations. We are exploring deeply today. I'm with an amazing guest, Dahlia-Attia King. Hi, Dahlia.
Hello, Heather. How are you?
Hey there. Hey there. So in my introduction to the show, I say that we're going to talk about things that what makes us human, what makes us tick. We are exploring the boundaries of both of those things today. And I just welcome Dahlia. She and I met last month at the Creative Mornings in Delray Beach. And Dahlia is the founder and CEO of seekpanacea.com. And we're going to get into genomes and sciences and some medicine and our possibilities and the frontiers of all of these things. So, Dahlia, please tell us what Seek Panacea is and start with that. And then we'll circle back to the very name of Panacea, which is all remedy. So we're talking about remedies and the future of what we can empower ourselves with information.
That's exactly right. Well, thank you for that introduction. So yes, I am the founder and CEO of Panacea, and seekpanacea.com is our website in case anybody wants to learn more. So what is Panacea? What do we do at Panacea? So our mission at Panacea is to increase access and utilization of life-saving clinical genetic testing, specifically a test called Whole Exome Sequencing, which sequences every single gene in your genome. And the reason we do this is because that information could essentially save your life. Genetic testing reveals your individual risk for developing a certain hereditary disease like cancer, sometimes cardiovascular disease. And of course, not all cancers and not all cardiovascular diseases are caused by known changes in the genome today, but some are. And people don't know that until they get genetic testing. And often in medicine today, unfortunately, people get genetic testing after they've already developed a problem. So what we want to do is make sure that the access to this type of testing is available to anyone and everyone that wants it in order for them to prevent disease from happening, to catch it or stop it from happening in the first place. That's really what we want to change here. We want to change the usage of genetic testing from something that is diagnostic, to help solve a problem that already exists. And we want to move that to a preventative tool that will literally help everyone get ahead of these problems. So it's super powerful, and we're making it possible for people to get in control of their health and save their own lives.
That's so amazing. And are these actual home kits, or is that part of, you're a paradigm buster? So is that part of the paradigm busting that you have to go through hospitals and insurances and medical channels?
Excellent question, Heather. And that's a really important clarification. So today, you're absolutely right. Today, clinical genetic testing is usually done through a doctor or a laboratory that your doctor refers you to, or a hospital potentially. And in a lot of cases, like I said, this only happens when somebody's already sick, when they already have cancer, they already have a big complex problem that genetic testing might help better understand, right? So what I'm hearing and what I've learned a lot today is that when people are really in control of their health and they want to get genetic testing, a lot of times they go and they talk to their doctor. And not all doctors, of course, but some doctors are a little bit hesitant to offer or prescribe genetic testing for someone who doesn't fit the classical mold of somebody who maybe should get genetic testing. And that classical mold is usually somebody who either has had cancer themselves or has a significant family history of cancer. If you don't have those things, if you don't fit that criteria, a lot of doctors will say, well, you don't really need testing. But unfortunately, what we're seeing today is that, and a lot of studies are showing this, is that almost half the people that end up getting cancer that have genetic changes that contribute to that cancer or are known to be, related to that cancer don't have a family history of cancer. and they don't have a personal history of cancer prior to that precise cancer moment. So that metric or that requirement for doctors to kind of say, well, you don't really fit into the mold because you don't have a family history is kind of failing 50% of the time. So the current model of going to your doctor and asking them for genetic testing and having them refer you out to a genetic counselor or, a laboratory and having, to convince your insurance company that you really need to get this test is a model that is failing. That's really the current model and it's totally not working. And so what Panacea does is we completely bypass all of these barriers. We have our own physicians that are licensed in all 50 states that essentially understand genetic testing. They oversee genetic testing on the back end. We have partnerships with genetic counselors who are absolute trained experts on genetic testing. And we partner with CLIA and CAP certified genetic laboratories that provide probably some of the world's best genetic sequencing and next-gen sequencing technology available. And all of those things are accessible online on our website. And just like you said at the start of this question, we send you through our laboratory partners an at-home kit. It is literally a cheek swab of the inside of your mouth, and it takes literally seconds to swab your cheek, and you send it back in a prepaid envelope. And you don't have to go to the lab. You don't have to go to the doctor. You don't have to get a needle stuck in your arm. You don't even have to prick your finger at home. Some of these tests require a finger stick at home. Ours doesn't. So it's not blood. It's not invasive. It's just saliva. And within, I think, 21 business days, your entire exome is sequenced and you get a report delivered right in your inbox. It's really, really fascinating.
I have, mind blown with so many different questions within this is, I'll get to the now what. So someone gets their report. And what I was hearing you saying is that you also have a team. And so is there backup? Because sometimes, and to be honest and fair, there could be people that want to do testing because they're afraid, right? It could be a flip from the empowerment part into, well, I got to do something, and it comes, and to have it there and at their house, what is the support system available to them so that they can understand? And then there's sort of the now what? Maybe it's before or beyond diet and exercise. Is there more of the backup after the report comes in? What happens through your team?
That's very, very smart to be thinking about that. The now what's important. It's not just about getting your test and then getting a report and washing your hands, right? The whole point.
Or freaking out. That's the thing.
Or freaking out. Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. So here's what I always say, and I'm a very optimistic person, but here's what I say. Every single person walks away from Panacea with one of two things. Either you have a little bit more peace of mind because maybe you don't have anything concerning that science knows about that shows up in your report, right? And so you have a little bit more peace of mind saying, okay, I still have to be healthy. I still have to diet. I still have to exercise. I still have to do these things, but I don't have an increased risk in my gene. So I feel a little bit better about things, right? Or you're going to walk away with empowerment. You're going to have a little bit of, a result that might say, listen, you have a higher risk for X, Y, Z, and here is what you can do about it. The reason why we exist is because the information that we show in our report is called actionable. This is a very important term in medical testing. Are the results that you are going to review and that you're going to see helpful for you to make further changes or, make different behaviors, right? So everything that shows up in your report actually has an available medical intervention that can help reduce and in some cases eliminate your risk if you have a genetic risk factor that does in fact increase your risk for developing issues. So for example, I'll give you my personal experience. I did this test. I was patient number 2. My sister was patient number 1, right? And we both found out, this is so insane, that we have a mutation in a gene that makes us 9 times more likely to develop ovarian cancer than the average woman. The incredible thing about this detail is ovarian cancer is one of those cancers that is incredibly difficult to find until it's way too late. And that's why it's so deadly, because it's usually found in later stages. So with this information, both my sister and I can talk to our doctors, right? We sat down with a genetic counselor, obviously through Panacea, and they were wonderful. And they explained to us what to do about this and what our real risks are and what our next steps are. But just like you said, the real next step, the what next, is to sit down with your doctor. Your doctor is imperative in your healthcare. We don't want to exclude our doctors. What we want to do with Panacea is perhaps get around the doctor just for this particular type of test, because it's easier for us to do that. So once we get this type of test, we want to involve our doctor and we want to consult with our doctor. And our doctors are trained to take this information and say, okay, if you do have a risk for this, here's what we can do medically for you. We can do more screening. We can perhaps do a little bit more blood testing. We can, in some cases, do a prophylactic surgical removal, like you hear a lot of women having mastectomies when they have the BRCA gene because the risk of developing cancer is just so high. So there's so many things that you can discuss with your doctor. Not all of them are extreme, like surgery, but there's so many actions you can take that you wouldn't otherwise take if you didn't have this information. So having these results and having actionable next steps is literally the reason why we do this, right? Because you can make a change, you can take an action to really get in control of your genetic destiny. It's insane. It's like having a map or a magic, crystal ball that shows you what to avoid and what to do. It's really incredible.
So thank you. And this brings me actually to two simultaneous questions. One is I want to kind of circle back into your own why. And you mentioned your sister. And if you had a certain academic or your heart passion, because here at Lasting Conversations, we get to the heart of everything. So what is it that has driven you down this particular path, say maybe away from something else, and then you got steered to this? The other piece that I think runs parallel, gets into what you were just talking about, is I had a personal moment. So there's a woman named Pamela Garden, and she's been on the show as the Badass Butterfly. And her wheelhouse is working with people and women, especially in STEM, science and technology, and all the medical fields and the biotech. So a number of years ago, I was in Cambridge, Mass, and I found myself at a hotel there, literally looking and watching all of the hubbub of all of the things that are happening there. And I had just been seeing the history of the microwave was really invented in 19 decades before we knew about it. And this was invented and researched decades before we knew about it. And I kept watching these people in this hum of activity and think to myself, well, what do they know now? What do they know now? What are they doing now that I'll find out about later? And so this is through seeing Pam, and now here you and I are talking about stuff that clearly has been, people are just saying, hey, I want to learn more about this, and I'm going to study this, and I'm now going to help people do the microbial, all the things to then help our future, help our society, and help people. So these are two huge questions that goes into your why. And the science is behind everything.
Yeah. So my story is interesting. And if you would have asked me 10 years ago or 15 years ago if I would be the founder of a health tech company, I would have.
And we've all had those. Like, go figure. Had I known, I wouldn't have. Right. This path is now a fruitful path. Yes.
And it was very unpredictable. I did not wake up one day and say, I want to be an entrepreneur, right? People ask me that all the time, like, why did you choose to be an entrepreneur? And I always say, I didn't choose to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship chose me.
Right.
And so,
where it's bigger than us. Exactly.
It really is.
It
And
is.
I wanted to be a doctor. I
Uh-huh.
actually was pre-med at the University of Miami, and I was studying to be a doctor just like my dad and my grandfather. Doctors are in my like lineage,
Okay,
right?
so it's in your genome to have the
Yeah,
medical background. Yeah.
exactly. It's in my
Okay.
genes.
Yeah.
So I was studying biology and chemistry at the University of Miami. I was on the pre-med track. I ended up getting very, very sick in college for years and years. I caught mono and unfortunately became chronic. I literally couldn't build immunity to it. And I was one of the very rare cases in the world that actually had chronic mononucleosis. Very, very strange. Instead of being the doctor, I became the patient, right?
Hmm.
And so it took me 9 years to graduate college, which is sort of embarrassing. But the reason why it took me so long is because I was hell bent on not switching my major. I wanted to finish pre-med, and it was insanely difficult, and the classes were hard, and everybody was telling me to switch my major. And I was like, no, I don't care if it takes me 2 decades, I'm going to finish pre-med. Long story short, I ended up finishing and graduating pre-med as I really wanted. I'm a very stubborn person. And I was applying to medical school, and I got an insanely obscure and kind of shady opportunity to work as a salesperson for a group of genetic laboratories. And I said, you know what? I need to make some money. I'm applying to med school. It's going to take a little time. I'll do it. I can sell genetic testing. Genetics was a huge part of my education. I love genetics and talk to doctors. Of course, I could sell testing to doctors. No, easy peasy. So I took the job opportunity. And honestly, Heather, it was about 3 months in, I sold 0 tests, zero. I made $0. And of course, this is all commission based. And I was like, oh my God, am I really that bad of a salesperson? Or is there
Maybe
something
it
else
was in
going
that
on?
word shady. Anyway,
Maybe it
go
was
ahead.
shady, right?
Yeah.
So what I started to realize is as I was talking to doctors, and these were world-renowned doctors, these were people who have been practicing medicine for longer than I'd been alive, and they knew their space so well. What I started to realize was that doctors themselves were not fully aware on how to implement genetics into the care of their patients. And they were very honest about it. They weren't, ashamed or secretive. They were telling me, Dahlia, we don't really use genetics or genetic testing in the care of our patients. Who do I refer for this test? What do I do with the results? They didn't even really know how to interpret the results.
Right.
And so what I started to learn was the awareness of physicians is part of the problem, right? And it's not their fault. Genetics is a really new field, especially, in medicine and in the average practice of medicine. And so I started to dig deeper, and I realized that genetic testing in general was incredibly underutilized, partly because of the lack of physician awareness, and partly because patients weren't able to get their testing covered by insurance companies. And so I was like, hold on, this is a major problem because this is a life-saving technology that's literally the future of healthcare, and no one can get their hands on testing. It was like such a mind-blowing revelation. And I said to myself, all right, am I going to go to med school and, know that this is a really serious problem that is not fixed? Or am I going to take the chance and maybe put a pin in med school and figure out if there's something I could do about fixing this really major problem in healthcare? And it was such a hard decision for myself because I couldn't imagine myself doing anything than being a doctor. It's all I dreamt about. It's all I worked hard for. And finally, I was able to make a decision by asking myself one question. And that one question is, what do you want to accomplish by being a doctor? And the simple answer was, I really want to help people. And the second question was, or the follow-up question was, if you were a decent doctor, like an averagely successful doctor and a decently successful entrepreneur, how many lives could you touch doing one or the other? And the simple answer was, I could probably touch so many more lives as an entrepreneur. it doesn't mean that being a doctor wasn't an amazing thing. And I still think it's one of the most noble professions on planet Earth. But the reality is, I could leave a footprint on this world in a much more significant way if I really did try to solve this problem. And that's essentially what led me down this path to becoming Panacea's founder. I don't know if I'm really going to be able to help people and save lives, but that's certainly what drives me every day. And that's certainly why I became the founder and CEO of Panacea, along with a team of people that are 10 times smarter than I am and that guide me and instruct me every single day on how to make this happen. But that's ultimately what led me here, is that single question: how many lives can you impact doing what you do?
I love everything that you have just said. I mean, what it boils down to are these between me and me moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Me and a higher power, for people that do that too. But between me and me, why am I really here? What is really important? What is in my heart? And so that you had your own come to Dahlia moment. And where that's kind of then the paradigm shift. And then there's something within you that just couldn't fit in the current box of medical system. You know, the system itself, as we know, some say, yeah, it's broken, or it's this, or it's this. I say it's part of our evolution, right? Agreed. This is an evolutionary time. And Agreed. So being at the forefront and frontier, you know, and they don't call it practicing medicine for nothing. This is the blind, double blind. You take what you know, and then you have to expand or discard. And it's a continuous experiment. So that your own self said, oh, well, I'm really getting called into a broader footprint in ways probably in that moment you didn't even realize.
Absolutely.
And I also love that you're touching on the team. So the team behind us, that we get to create our team as visionaries, as people who are at forefronts, to have a voice and to say, hey, I think we have something here, how to create that team that are the boots on the ground to help us forge and to
Absolutely.
Move forward.
I would be nowhere without my team. Right. And you know how they always say, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room? That's exactly how I feel every day. I promise you, I am the least accomplished. I am the least intelligent. I'm the least educated of all of my co-founders, right? They are so brilliant, and they make me better, and they allow me to do what I need to be doing. And so any CEO or founder that claims, you know, they're the ultimate, you know, leader or the whatever, the key to the team is probably not surrounding themselves with the right people. And so I'm very, very honest about the fact that I'm nothing without my team. That's just a hard fact.
That's just beautiful. And of course, we get to rephrase all those words and say, you know, there's the book learning and the mastery of that. You're absolutely correct. And yet you are intelligent. You're pulling from intelligence from within to know, to help guide you in all of this. And
well, thank you.
This is really cool. So let's then, I suppose, tapping about the very etymology of Panacea. And this is going to lead to part of a discussion that we had before this interview, which is to help us clarify what might be out there in our own brain or in the storylines that could be fearful. As everything that's new, people have lots of opinions, and many of the opinions, some of them may or may not be true of what's out there. So the very word panacea is all remedy, and people have this thing, and we're still in, well, we're not in a pandemic, but let's say I call it the 2020. The 2020s have happened. Right. And that really shook everybody's planetary core of health, what it means, who has access, what do we know, what we don't know. So it shook the foundations of the medical systems and insurances. Sure. It just shook everything. And what people want to know is, am I safe and am I healthy? And what about my loved ones? And so it's so much of it can spiral away from the stuff that you're talking about, which is empowerment and knowledge and access. And it can spiral into fear spaces. Now, I could, I'm usually team human, and there's a better way of doing business. So like when you said, maybe, I don't know if that company was shady or not, but there's an assumption, rightly so, that sending information off about, especially about our genetics. I was going to be a personal historian, and a company at the time, their backers literally were for data mining. And I could, in my conscious, couldn't record somebody and their family histories through that medium, that because that company ultimately wanted to sell for data mining. Now, your company very well is probably not that, because you and I wouldn't even be talking if it was about that. We just wouldn't, right? There's the consciousness to everything. We wouldn't be speaking if there wasn't the heart of what it is that you're trying to do here. Others, and that gets into fear factors. So help clarify, gene splicing, and people want to make perfect children, and people want to fix very quickly and put a quick Band-Aid on something. And it can just spiral into, I want to create the perfect baby, or I want to this, or something horrible is about to happen. Walk us through some of the hole poking. And again, when we first met and you said, come and poke some holes and let's clarify. And so we're going to get to that part of the show, Dahlia, to help us understand if people are listening and they go, yeah, but what about this? Or I'm afraid of that. You have some beautiful answers to that from your wheelhouse and your own come from.
Wow. Well, there's a lot of layers to this question.
Right. And we don't have to talk about all of it, but it gets to that nugget of where can we look in and research ourselves, right? And create our own team of knowledge and the people around us versus what might be going haywire, or to even rethink. Maybe some people are involved with certain medical professionals or whatever that don't have the best interest. Crap, I do have to say it. There are some weird things out there. And there were body parts being bought and sold out of Harvard. This crap is real. And it's really unfortunate because it in some ways takes away from what you're trying to do to help people understand what can be beneficial when there are still really creepy, shady people that do want to really shady things. So it's a broad piece to what's a frontier science.
Yeah. So let's start with the very basics. With the question of, it's a very valid question of, okay, so I'm sending a sample of my DNA to this company, and I have never heard of whole exome sequencing. I've never even heard of this company before. Why would I do that? Like, who knows what is happening with my DNA? And that's a very, very fair concern. And it is a concern that I hear very, very often.
Right.
So I first want to talk about what our policy as a company is on privacy and on data privacy. So when my co-founders and I sat down and talked about what our data policy is and what we want, right? We asked ourselves a very personal question.
It goes back to intent. I love it. So what is our general core intention? I love it.
That's exactly right. So we asked ourselves, forget about being founders of Panacea or founders of a tech company or founders of a genetic company. What do you, Dahlia, want from a company as a user, right, of that company's product or service? And the bottom line is, the only way I can develop trust with a company is if they basically earn my trust, right? I'm not going to just blindly believe a company because they tell me what they want me to hear. So what we decided to do with data, because we literally are capturing the most essential data about you, which is your genetic data. What we decided to do is not touch the data. Basically, what that means is the data is your data. it is not our data. And so we believe in giving you the control of the usage of your data,
Right.
giving you transparency and giving you power to say, I want to share my data with this research institute, but I don't want to share my data with this particular company. That's your decision as a user of Panacea. We do not make that decision. Mm-hmm. And that is what is central to our ethos as a company. This empowerment and this data control and this transparency has to be inherent to our business model. Mm-hmm. We cannot proceed to build a company or a brand or a vision or even a noble mission without having this very important piece be the core of what we do. And so at Panacea, we do not sell your data. We do not share your data. We don't do anything with your data without you knowing and giving us permission to do that. And so, and by the way, Heather, 8 out of 10 people in studies want to share their data for development of science and the furthering of science and medicine. But sometimes they want transparency into who's using their data and how is it being used, right? And so we want to enable that. We want to give people the transparency and the control. And so that's the basics of how we deal with data privacy. Basically, it's your data, it's not our data. The other thing that is worth mentioning is in order for any company worth its weight in salt to function, you really should be abiding by certain things like HIPAA, right? Which includes patient privacy and, the very careful sharing of data and making sure that patient information be identified if it does need to float between you and your laboratory partners and whoever, right? This is really, really important. Not a lot of companies that cater directly to consumer and even offer genetic testing abide by HIPAA. Wow. But we do. We do because we use medical testing and we use medical professionals and we're providing, very specific health information. So we certainly make sure that that's a top priority. The other thing that's very important to focus on is a law called GINA. And this is really important for people to know who are afraid of getting genetic testing. GINA stands for Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, which basically protects us from discrimination by insurance companies. So if you get a genetic test and you have a variant like myself that makes you more at risk for developing cancer or some other hereditary disease, your insurance company by law cannot discriminate against you. So this is really, really important because there are laws that protect us. So that helps with the fear. Of course, there's certain nuances depending on the state for GINA, and it doesn't apply to life insurance. So there's some things that you still should consider. But in general, there should be a little bit of a quelling of fear because there are things in place that do protect us. And of course, if you work with a company like Panacea, our top priority is to, of course, empower you with your data and give you the authority to choose where your data goes. Not all companies do that, but we certainly do. So I hope that answers some of your questions about fear and genetic testing. And your question was much deeper than that, but that's kind of a start.
No, that's beautiful. And that's fantastic. And I now we'll go to one other piece of that, which is which you helped clarify. Some of the storylines, people can gene splice and create the perfect child. We can take the information and perhaps make somebody not be a certain way, maybe, and that we have these technologies or that people are even doing it. These are some of the storylines that are out there that we can mutate and splice and create the perfection. And please clarify.
Yeah. So
what's reality and what's a non-reality, or what's a potential and what's not a potential?
Sure. So designer humans is not a thing today, right? There's no lab in the US or anywhere else in the world that's kind of creating these designer humans. Like it's not a thing yet. That doesn't mean that the technology is not necessarily available or that it is not getting there, right? But there are so many ethical concerns in the scientific community about doing that, right? Like, where do we draw the line?
Right.
What's ethical? What's reasonable? What's fair? What's unfair? What's dangerous? I mean, when we start playing with genes, we don't even understand the consequences of that, right? Like, could there be some horrific consequence to editing genes and creating this designer human, right? So it doesn't exist today. And anybody who, sort of believes that that's a thing is unfortunately gravely misinformed. Now, again, the technologies, the gene editing technology is certainly something that is being worked on and developed. There is a gene therapy that exists today that actually helps cure blindness in children. And it's still quite early, but I think it has been utilized and has been effective. And so there's certain examples where gene editing is really, really awesome and beneficial and can essentially replace that faulty gene with a healthy gene. But again, that extreme example of creating a designer human is just not something that really exists today. So I just want to clarify that particular piece.
Good. Okay. Well, that is very helpful. So what is it, what else would you like us to know in terms of your vision? I think I'm going to go ahead and, because part of my own genome is Louis Agassiz. He was an ichthyologist, and you can't say he invented, but he was an explorer that learned all about the Ice Age. And he's an archaeologist and helped create and found natural history museums and all of that. So those curiosities are also embedded in me.
Oh, I love that.
And then I have another relative who we have stuff within us and within our consciousness and within our own selves and in our markers that have made us who we are. Now, at the same time, as evolution does, we have people and children being born who are coming in and their own genetic makeup might be a little bit different. Maybe their bloodlines are a little bit different, that is evolving. Where do you see your particular company? And I suppose I should ask, is there a way that people might retest after a while, or there might be something that has changed in their whole body makeup that they now no longer had to worry about this, that things are moving and evolving? And are you seeing within your own company that the technologies will move and adapt as well?
Yeah. So whole exome sequencing is the sequencing of all of the genes that you inherited from mom and dad. Now, those genes are not going to change, right? They were there at your conception and they are always going to be there. What does change, though, is the science that is able to interpret and understand those genes.
Right.
So your question is very, very smart, because we will eventually, as science evolves, better understand what is held in your genes. The report that you receive today when you get a test from Panacea is essentially only as good as science is today, right?
Right.
So 10 years from now, the results that you receive might actually have a different interpretation.
Yep.
And this is exactly why we offer the raw data to every user, and it's free. You don't have to pay for it. That raw data basically is everything that came out off of the machine from your genetic sequencing. And the good news about that raw data is you can input it into so many different softwares. Some of them are even free. And you can do that over time. And as science develops, you'll get these new notifications that could apply to something that was found in your genome that has a current explanation that didn't necessarily 3 or 5 years ago. So that information is valuable to you for the rest of your life. And in fact, one of our goals at Panacea, which is not available today, is to be able to have that notification system available to all our users indefinitely, right? So that once you get a test with Panacea, you get a report. And then as science progresses, if there's anything new that might apply to your particular genetic makeup, you'll get notified. because it's an science is an ongoing thing. Just like you said, it
Right.
constantly evolves and constantly grows. So that's the real value of getting all of your genes sequenced in one shot, because you can always reference it and kind of go back to it. It's not going to change.
I'm sorry, but I think this is to your continuing is how far back, you mentioned mom and dad, but this information, how far, how many intergenerational dimensions are we talking about here in terms of this testing?
Yeah. So essentially, and this is a good question for my geneticist co-founder. He understands this much better than I do. But from my understanding, and don't quote me on this, eventually your genes kind of dilute. So by the time you're talking about, your 11th great granddaughter, or even sooner, maybe third or fourth great granddaughter, the sharing of genes becomes lesser and lesser over time, right? Because you have different mothers and different fathers, and
right.
et cetera, et cetera. So you sort of begin to create this new variation of genes with every generation.
Right.
I think that it's important to consider the genetic variation up to, I want to say, your grandparents, maybe your great grandparents, but I think even by the time you consider your great grandparents, the genes have been quite diluted. And so when it comes to your health, not ancestry, right? We're not talking about ancestry here. We're talking about your health, the things that affect you as an individual and your susceptibility for disease. You're really only considering a few generations, not 10, 20 generations, because the genes do dilute.
Wonderful. And boy, we've really, really touched so much. Is what else would you like to say? Is there something else on your heart in terms of the very conversation? Yeah.
So I think every time I have a conversation like this, of course, you allow me to share so much, and I'm so appreciative. But the one takeaway that I hope people that are listening can kind of think about is, this is a conversation that you have to keep having. Mm-hmm. You have to talk to your friends and your family and your children and your siblings and even your parents about genetic testing, because it not only can affect you and save your life, but it could save the life of your loved ones, right? The people that you are most related to, because after all, you share half of your genes with your first degree relatives, right? Like me and my sister. And so have this conversation. Ask your friends, ask your family, have you heard about whole exome sequencing? Would you consider it? Do you want to do it? Let's do it together, even if it's not for you. And genetic testing might not be for everyone. Talk about it with people, because you can save a life. And of course, Panacea is not the only way that you can access whole exome sequencing. It is one of the few ways, and it's probably one of the most affordable and easy ways, but it's not the only way. I would be lying to you if I said we're the only person that does this. We're really not. And so explore it, learn about it, think about what you can do to empower yourself with this information. Or again, if it's not for you, think about what you could do to save a friend or save a sibling or anybody that is, related to you. This is so, so important. And in fact, I would love to offer your listeners a special discount. If you go to seekpanacea.com today and you enter the code VIP10, you'll get 10% off of the test. And if you bring a friend, you can certainly email us and we'll give you a further discount. And you can email us, of course, at contact@seekpanacea.com and let us know you're one of the listeners of this beautiful show. And we're happy to help you. We just want people to have the conversation. People have to talk about this.
I appreciate that. And I think we'll leave it at that. And I appreciate that you mentioned, which is part of the ... the next time, or for people to explore with themselves, is who might not want to or should, right? It's one of those, I was just flashing to the movie Arrival, right? If you knew ahead of time, would you do anything? Would it change your life trajectory? So I'm going to leave it at that for people to explore. and Dahlia-Attia King. I am so grateful for this conversation. I think this is really important. Again, it's at the forefront. It's frontier stuff. It can be difficult. These are deep dives, personally, professionally, business models, the whole thing. This is a very rich and deep conversation, and I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time out of your very busy day to be here.
No, thank you. Thank you for giving me the platform to be able to share what we do and share our mission with everybody. You are just as key as we are because you allow us to have a voice, and we're so thankful for that. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And thanks everybody for listening. Please be sure to like, follow, review, and share this podcast. And if you'd like to be part of the conversations, please send emails to podcast@lastingconversations.com and follow us on Facebook. This is Lasting Conversations. We get to the heart of everything.